I've always believed real success doesn't need an audience. In Silicon Valley, where everyone rushes to show off their latest milestone, I took a different route, quiet, focused, and far away from the spotlight. I'm David Chin, and this is the story of how staying silent became my biggest power move. At 22, I walked away from Chin Consulting Group, our family's prestigious firm, to chase my own dream in tech. "You'll come crawling back," my Uncle James had scoffed, another kid chasing the next Steve Jobs fantasy. To them, I was throwing away a guaranteed future. Chin Consulting was the crown jewel of our family, built from my grandfather's one-man shop into a Fortune 500 empire. Every Chin was expected to fall in line, keep the name strong, and never rock the boat. But I had other plans. While studying computer science at Stanford, I built an AI system that could totally change how companies manage supply chains. My professor was impressed. My family wasn't. They just saw a stubborn kid with stars in his eyes. "Call us when you fail," Uncle James said at our last family dinner. "Your entry-level spot will be waiting." I left without a fight, just me, my savings, and a stubborn belief that I could make this work. The early days were rough. I lived in a tiny apartment, coded around the clock, and ate enough instant noodles to last a lifetime. But little by little, something amazing took shape. That something became Quantum Solutions. But I kept my name off it. I'd learned enough from growing up around power-hungry execs. Putting your face front and center invites too much noise. Officially, the company was backed by a private group. I was just the CTO. No one needed to know I was also the founder and the silent CEO. And the tech? It worked, better than I could have imagined. Our AI predicted supply chain disruptions months in advance, streamlined inventory, and slashed costs by 40%. Within 5 years, Quantum Solutions was worth over $2 billion. Yet, to my family, I was still the guy who played with computers. I let them believe I'd fizzled out in some no-name startup. At reunions, I kept things vague, just working at a small tech company, I'd say. Eventually, they stopped asking. Uncle James, especially, loved rubbing it in. "Mark made partner." He'd brag about my cousin. "Some of us are still doing real work." They'd laugh, I'd nod. But what they didn't know, Chin Consulting's biggest client, Global Dynamics, a $50 billion company, was quietly negotiating with Quantum Solutions to replace their entire supply chain system. And then came last week's family meeting. Uncle James called us all together for what he called a major announcement. Global Dynamics was going digital, and Chin Consulting had landed the job, a $100 million contract, our biggest ever. "This project will define our legacy," he boomed. "I expect everyone to give it their full attention." I just sipped my coffee in the back. I already knew everything. I'd been meeting with Global Dynamics CEO for months. They weren't just upgrading, they were replacing everything, with my technology. Then Uncle James turned to me. "David," he said with a smug smile, "since you claim to be the tech expert, why don't you share your wisdom with the rest of us?" His tone dripped with sarcasm. He had no idea what was coming next. I scanned the room, noting the smirks on my relatives' faces. Mark, freshly minted as the youngest partner, looked like he was about to burst with pride. Aunt Linda shook her head in disappointment. Even my own parents couldn't meet my eyes, clearly embarrassed by their so-called failed son. "I think Global Dynamics is making a smart move," I said calmly. "Their current systems are outdated." Uncle James let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Oh, and what would you know about enterprise-level systems?" He leaned back, arms folded. "How's that little startup going? Still pretending to be a CEO?" Laughter rippled around the table. I stood, buttoning my jacket. "Actually, I've got an early meeting tomorrow. I should head out." "Running away again?" Mark called. "We could use someone in IT. Think you can manage that?" More laughter followed me to the door. "David," Uncle James said, his voice sharp with finality, "stop pretending. You're not a CEO. You're not anything. It's time to grow up and face reality." I paused at the threshold, remembering the email I'd received just hours earlier. Global Dynamics was ready. The deal was approved. All it needed was my signature. I turned slightly. "See you soon," I said simply, and walked out. The ride home in my modest 5-year-old Toyota felt different that night. I passed sleek black Mercedes and shiny Teslas, vehicles my cousins drove with pride. Let them have their illusions. Tomorrow morning, everything would change. I arrived at Global Dynamics headquarters 30 minutes early. My assistant, Sarah, was already waiting in the lobby, holding the final contracts and my favorite coffee, not the burnt diner brew I drank at family gatherings, but the rich, premium roast I actually preferred. "Ready for the big moment, boss?" she asked with a smile. "Just another meeting," I replied, even though we both knew it was so much more. I wore a sharp, navy blue suit, classic, understated, no flashy logos, no statement pieces, except for one, the vintage Patek Philippe on my wrist, my grandfather's watch, a nod to the legacy I'd honored in my own way. At exactly 9 a.m., the elevator dinged. Out walked Uncle James, Mark, and two senior partners from Chin Consulting. They moved like royalty, striding through the lobby without noticing me seated a few feet away. "Mr. Chin," the receptionist called. Uncle James stepped forward confidently. "I'm sorry," she said with a polite smile, "I meant David Chin." Everything stopped. Uncle James turned slowly, eyes locking on mine for the first time. Confusion twisted into disbelief. "David, what are you doing here?" Before I could respond, Thomas Wright, the CEO of Global Dynamics, stepped out of the conference room. "David, there you are," he said warmly, "we're ready to finalize the agreement." He shook my hand, smiling. "The board is thrilled to implement Quantum's platform. Your team has outdone themselves." Uncle James looked like he'd been struck. Mark's jaw hung open. One of the partners dropped his pen. "Shall we?" Thomas gestured toward the room. As we walked past, I caught my uncle's reflection in the glass wall, pale, stunned, like he was seeing a ghost. Inside, the conference room buzzed with executives, legal teams, and board members from both sides. At the head of the table, Thomas cleared his throat. "Before we begin," he said, "I'd like to thank David Chin, the founder and CEO of Quantum Solutions, for personally leading this project. His AI innovations are about to revolutionize our entire global supply chain." The silence from the Chin delegation was deafening. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to say anything at all. The sound of Uncle James choking on his water echoed through the room. Thomas barely blinked. "We've asked Chin Consulting to handle the implementation," he continued, "but of course, that's subject to your approval, David, since they'll be working with your systems." Every head turned to me. The air was thick with tension, 10 years of mockery, dismissal, and backhanded remarks suspended in a single breath. "Chin Consulting is a solid firm," I said evenly. "I should know. I learned business watching them. If they're willing to operate under Quantum's direction, I have no objections." Uncle James turned an alarming shade of purple. Mark, in full panic mode, was already tapping frantically on his phone, no doubt trying to confirm what the internet had just made very clear. I wasn't working for Quantum Solutions, I was Quantum Solutions. The next hour blurred into handshakes and signatures. The deal was monumental, a $500 million contract, with Chin Consulting managing $100 million of the work, under my oversight. Each time Uncle James had to defer to me on a contract point, he winced like it physically hurt. After the signing, Thomas invited everyone to the executive dining room for a celebratory lunch. As we headed out, Uncle James finally cornered me. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked, low and urgent. "All these years." I met his gaze. "Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly, "or would you have tried to control it, like everything else?" He had no answer. Word spread fast. By dinner, my phone lit up with messages from relatives who had suddenly remembered how much they'd always believed in me. Cousin Mark sent a rambling apology. Aunt Linda called to ask if I'd speak at her son's business school. The tone had changed. That evening, my parents showed up at my office. They didn't come with questions, excuses, or pride, just tears, and something that looked like peace. "We should have supported you," my mother said, her voice shaking. "We were so focused on tradition, we couldn't see what you were building." My father didn't say much. He just hugged me for a long time. "Your grandfather would have been proud," he said. "He built something from nothing, so did you." The months that followed reshaped both companies. Quantum Solutions became a Silicon Valley giant. Our valuation doubled. Chin Consulting adapted, now operating under our leadership. Uncle James had to get used to the chain of command being led by the nephew he'd spent a decade dismissing. I didn't change my lifestyle. Still drove the same 5-year-old Toyota. Still coded late into the night when an idea hit. But I did buy one thing, my grandmother's old house in Palo Alto. I restored it to how I remembered it, warm, simple, filled with legacy. I added one modern feature, a sleek home office, where I could work surrounded by memories of the people who taught me that real success doesn't come from applause. 6 months after the reveal, Forbes interviewed me. They asked why I'd kept my success hidden for so long. Success is like clean code, I told them. It doesn't need to shout, it just needs to run, smooth, elegant, and ready when it matters. The piece made waves. My family saw it, of course. Uncle James printed it out and taped it to his office wall. I still don't know if it was penance or pride. At a family dinner hosted at my house weeks later, he pulled me aside. I was wrong, he said, the words clearly difficult. You didn't just succeed, you redefined what success looks like. I nodded. The family legacy was never about following one path. I replied, it's about building something that matters. These days, I mentor young founders, quiet ones, like I was, the underestimated, the overlooked, the ones too busy building to bother with bragging. Quantum keeps growing, but my rhythm stays the same. Simple car, quiet nights, long hours. I didn't change for success. Success revealed who I was. Yesterday, I visited my grandfather's grave. I placed a copy of the Forbes magazine beside his headstone. You always said real success leaves footprints, I whispered. I hope I've made a path someone else can follow. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. Global Dynamics wanted to double the contract. They'd need Chin Consulting's help again. Which meant Uncle James would be sitting through yet another meeting, answering to the same disappointment he once mocked. But as I started the engine, I wasn't smiling out of spite. I was smiling because, after all these years, they finally understood what I'd always known. Success doesn't need permission. And it doesn't need to shout. Sometimes, the quiet ones are the ones rewriting the future, one elegant line at a time.